There are some seriously interesting crochet stitches out there, and if you've ever done any Pinterest scrolling or looking through magazines, you've probably seen a few of them that just really caught your eye and made you say, wow. Not only are these stitches seriously interesting to look at, but they're also really interesting to crochet. And that's probably the biggest point to all of this. Getting your motivation back, sparking some creativity and some inspiration, and there's just no better way than by using one of the most interesting stitches you'll ever see. Every single one of these stitches is equally unique and amazing, at least in my opinion. So in no particular order, the first most interesting stitch that you'll ever crochet and maybe will ever see is Broomstick Lace. Now, Broomstick Lace is incredibly unique for a couple of different reasons. First of all, you use a very large knitting needle, or a broomstick, and that's where the name comes from. But modern crocheters will typically buy a US 50 knitting needle, and you work the stitches onto the knitting needle to create the big loops. You put a twist in it, and that's how the stitch is created. Now, obviously, with a stitch that has lace in the name, you would expect that this has a very lacy component to it, and that it does. So it's not the perfect stitch for every single project, and I think that's the trend you'll see with a lot of these really interesting and unique stitches. But the idea is that it's so unique and beautiful for the right project. I've seen shawls made with broomstick lace. I have made an infinity scarf with broomstick lace. I'll link that pattern in the description below. I have used it for wraps myself. There's just an assortment of things that you can try with this stitch, but the bottom line is that you try this stitch. Don't let the fact that you need a very large knitting needle slow you down. You can get super creative with the items that you have in your house. Obviously, a broomstick is the classic choice. Something around that size is best, but you can go with something a little bit smaller. If you have a really, really big crochet hook, it's not going to be optimum because they're, a lot shorter than a knitting needle or a broomstick, but it can still absolutely work. I've heard of people using the end of a hammer. I mean, how creative is that? Like, look around your house, figure out what you have that's roughly the size of a broomstick, and run with it. I do have a step-by-step tutorial on how you crochet broomstick lace, and we'll work up a little swatch together. I'll link that in the description below. I've also got the written instructions on my website if you're a little bit more interested in reading patterns instead of watching visuals. But no matter where you get your resources or how you learn how to crochet this stitch, give it a try. It's so eye-catching and so beautiful, and everyone will notice it. Now, if you're a fan of chevrons and ripple stitches, this next one will have you dancing off of your seat. The Vintage Fan Ripple. This is like chevron stitches to the maximum. It's again one of those stitches where there's a pretty big lacy component, so it's not the perfect stitch for every type of project, but it is beautiful for the right project. Now, actually, the first project I ever saw with the Vintage Fan Ripple Stitch was a blanket. And yeah, you could argue that a blanket that has some holes in it's probably not the best kind of blanket, but it was a beautiful piece on the back of a couch, and it was just eye-catching and beautiful, and I had to crochet one myself, so I did. It was one of my favorite projects. I enjoyed looking at it. I enjoyed working with it, because you know what? The stitches used in this stitch are so incredibly tall. So if you're like me and you like to crochet big projects like blankets, but you don't like it to take years and months to complete, then the Vintage Fan Ripple might just be the stitch for your next blanket project. With this stitch, you use triple trebles, which take a little bit of time to get used to, but man, do they work up fast. Every stitch is a couple of inches high, so for every repeat, you're adding chunks to your blanket, and that is so fun to watch happen. This is a really cool and interesting stitch if you want to incorporate a lot of colors into your project. I personally like to break up the pattern sort of in repeats or in chunks, so I've got stripes to my pattern, but it's also really, really pretty, worked in a single color or with a variegated or self-striping yarn. I mean, don't let me convince you too much on this stitch. You just have to try it for yourself. It's so interesting, so fun, and yet so easy at the same time. It may be one of the easier stitches to crochet on this list. So I have instructions for how to crochet the vintage fan ripple on my website. I'll have that linked in the description as well. The next stitch that I think is the most interesting, probably the most interesting on this entire list, hairpin lace. You use an instrument just like this. This is called a hairpin lace loom, and you work the stitches on this loom. It creates loops and gathers, and you can do different things with those loops to create something that doesn't even look crocheted. The cool thing about hairpin lace is you can look at it and think that it's knitting or something. It doesn't look like anything that you've ever seen with a crochet hook, and that's why I get so excited about this stitch. I went through a big phase where I couldn't get enough hairpin lace. I've made a cowl, again, an infinity scarf, with the hairpin lace loom. I've also played around with another scarf where it was kind of like a braided scarf in the middle, and I had some crochet stitches, you know, some traditional stitches along the outside, and that was super cool. I've also created a shawl, not an actual pattern, but one that I created for myself using a really fine cotton yarn, and added like short little segments to create kind of a triangle shawl, but in like a ripple kind of fashion. Just one of the most interesting and cool stitches, techniques really, that you can come across. If you're feeling a little bit fatigued with your normal crochet hooks and your everyday stitch patterns, try hairpin lace. This loom will cost you a few dollars. I do recommend getting one of these. You can get kind of creative. I've heard of people using 2 knitting needles and fastening them together. Honestly, I picked this up on Amazon for maybe like $5. I don't know what the current price is. I've had this for many years, but hairpin lace looms, they're affordable enough that it's absolutely worth the investment just to give this stitch a try. There's just some really cool and interesting things that you can do with hairpin lace. It's an entire can of worms that I would love to open up if you're interested in it, but for now, just trust me and try hairpin lace. Now this next stitch is worked with your traditional crochet hook, no extra tools required, but it doesn't look like crochet hardly at all. I mean, to a trained eye, you can clearly see that it's crocheted, but the feather stitch is amazing. When I saw this stitch for the first time, I was really intrigued by the idea of how quickly a project could come together because of the size of the stitches. And my theories were correct. It is one of those stitches that works up incredibly fast because the stitches are so tall. But not only that, it makes the squishiest fabric you have ever felt in your life. That's why this is one of my all-time favorite stitches for blankets. I have a blanket pattern available on my website. It's a great stash busting project because the feather stitch, well, its little quirk is that it's kind of a yarn hog. You'll use quite a bit of yarn when you work up a blanket in this stitch pattern, which is perfect when you need to use up a whole lot of yarn. If you're familiar with puff stitches and how puff stitches are kind of worked, you'll be pretty comfortable, I think, with the feather stitch. It's the same general kind of concept, but it's worked obviously a little bit different to come up with this really cool and interesting feather shape. This one creates a truly reversible fabric too, so not only is it great for blankets, but it's also really great for projects that both sides show at the same time. But the one thing you do want to consider is the thickness of the fabric. So you could absolutely make a garment, a sweater, or a cardigan with the feather stitch, but if I were going to do that, I would choose a thinner yarn just because you don't want a big chunky piece of fabric on your body. This is another one of those stitches where you absolutely have to try it like right now. Put down your current project and give it a try. I have a complete step-by-step tutorial on how to crochet the feather stitch. I've got written instructions if that's more your jam. I've got a pattern that you can follow if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration. It's just one of those really cool stitches that doesn't require a lot of extra effort. And the next super interesting crochet stitch that you'll probably see this week, maybe you've seen this one before, it's more likely that you've seen this one probably over some of the others, but that doesn't make it any less interesting or cool, and that's the crocodile stitch. This one's top of mind for me right now because I'm working on a little clutch or like a handbag or zipper pouch, whatever you want to call it, using crocodile stitches, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. Every time I revisit this stitch, I fall in love with it a little bit more. I remember the first time I came across the crocodile stitch on Pinterest. It was a hooded cowl that somebody had made that had all of these beautiful crocodile stitch scales. It was kind of like whimsical, magical kind of colors, so it just reminded me of like just a beautiful dragon scale cape, something that you would see in movies, and I was just sold. I loved the way that looked. But not only is it really interesting to look at, it is just as interesting to crochet. This one comes together unlike any crochet stitch you've probably ever tried if you've never done this one before. You basically have a framework that you work with, and you add the scales kind of onto that framework. So if you're looking for something fresh and interesting and fun, the crocodile stitch might be the way to go. You can use your regular crochet hooks. There's an assortment of patterns out there available that you can dive into. Again, this is one of those stitches where it doesn't fit for every single project, but the projects that it does work for, it just makes the most unique and interesting thing. I've seen this in baby blankets before. That has been really pretty. Shawls and hooded capes like I was telling you about. I've seen people use the crocodile stitch for hand warmers and mittens, and that looked really cool and interesting. And mermaid tails. I don't think mermaid tails are nearly as popular as they were maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago, but oh my goodness. A crocodile stitch mermaid tail, I mean, you won't find anything that catches your eye quicker than that. So I have full step-by-step instructions on how you can crochet the crocodile stitch. I've got that linked in the description below. And check out my recent video where I talk about crocodile stitches and how you can make them look even neater right off the hook without any blocking or additional steps. I totally stumbled across this by accident when I revisited the crocodile stitch after so many years of just not trying it. I got myself all twisted and turned around when I crocheted the scales, and I crocheted them kind of backwards to how I usually do, and that resulted in a much neater scale. So it was kind of a happy accident. I've got that video. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you love the crocodile stitch or you're going to learn how to do the crocodile stitch. It's just a game changer. You know, if I had thought this through enough, I probably would have come up with some kind of arbitrary rating for each one of these stitches, but let's be honest, they're all incredibly interesting and they all serve a very unique purpose. I think no matter which one of these stitches you try first, you can't go wrong. If you don't have a hairpin lace loom or a really large knitting needle, then maybe try the vintage fan ripple or the crocodile stitch or the feather stitch with the tools that you already have available. But if you're looking for something that's truly unique, try hairpin lace, try broomstick lace. I think you'll become obsessed. It's very easy to fall into a rabbit hole with these two techniques because it goes beyond just what I'm showing you here. Especially hairpin lace. It is kind of a genre all on its own, like Tunisian crochet. It's just very cool. So I guess if I could rate one of these the highest and said, if you're gonna try one, try this one, I think hairpin lace would win today's video. I really do. I think that it is by far the coolest and most unique crochet stitch, although kind of more of a technique than anything else. Potato, potato, right? It's still I think, the most fun and interesting form of crochet. But I would love to know, what would you pick? What would be your ranking order if you had to put these crochet stitches in order based on the most unique or interesting, and maybe the one that's maybe not so interesting and unique? What order would you put them in? Tell me in the comments below. If you liked this video and you like interesting crochet stitches, let me know that too. There's a ton more that I could talk about. And yeah, we can do more videos like this if it's something that you're interested in. Don't forget the links to written instructions, video tutorials, projects, basically all the inspiration that you would need to get started with one of these stitches. You can find all of that linked in the description below. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.